about this trip yet. People ask me how it was, and all I can say is life-changing. All I can say is I told my kids the other night at youth group, I said it just changed my perspective on a lot of things. And we got to love a lot of kids and hug them, and they just wanted to touch us, and it just put a lot of things in perspective for me. But I'm going to do my best this morning to try to, my message and what I'm going to talk about my trip goes hand in hand, but I'm going to try my best to get through this. And, a lot of things that I experienced, you're not going to know what it's like until you go. And you can talk about things that you're going to see in other countries, and but until you're there seeing it for the first time and looking, and you don't understand. And so the tears and you guys aren't maybe going to feel what I felt because you haven't seen it. But it was life-changing. And, people are, would you go back? Would you go back? And if God allows me, then yes. I don't know. That may be my only time to ever go, and I'm okay with that, if that's what God wants. But would I go back? Yeah, absolutely, if God will want me to. But on Thursday, on the 14th, we flew out, and it started a journey where I knew my life would be forever changed. It was a journey that I'll never forget. And I believe that this journey began a new season in my life of realizing how desperate I need to be for Jesus. Because He is the only reason that I breathe or I even get out of bed in the mornings. Our travel was long, and the first flight, our long flight, we had a 4-hour delay. So we sat on the plane for 15 hours. And that was very long and very hard. But I'm thankful for God's protection. Our leader, Christy, she said we just consider a delay as God's protection. And it was something, simple. It was I say simple, but it was a starter on one of the engines, so I guess you could say it's pretty important. Taylor's here this morning, and she was a little bit freaked out on the plane because we were getting ready to fly over the Atlantic Ocean, and they were going to work on the engine. So, I'm glad we figured it out while we were still on the ground. But so we had a 4-hour delay, but I'm so thankful for God's protection in that. And when we got to Kumasi or Accra, and we were exhausted. I mean, we were just spent. And we traveled to Kumasi, and that was probably the longest bus ride of my life. I mean, it was just like, are we ever going to get there? We were wiped out, but we were so eager to see what God was going to do. And I have written down the best part was the hotel didn't have air conditioning, so it was good. By the time we got there, we were just so exhausted, ready to go to bed and see what God was going to do. And, so on Saturday, we went to the first school we went to, and we got to commission one of Jacob's wells that was there, and that was really awesome. And Kim and Craig were able to go for the first time and see those firsthand, and that was really cool. It was hard, but it was a lot of healing for them, and so I'm thankful that I was able to go with them and witness that. But the kids, I mean, they flocked to you. I mean, they were so overwhelmed that we would be there, and they came and they said, "Oh, we want to be your best friend." They didn't speak super great English, but that's what I got out of it. Is they wanted to be best friends, and they always wanted a picture. I mean, they always wanted a picture. And Kumasi is a little bit more. They have a little bit more wealth. They're a little wealthier city. They're the second biggest city in Ghana. And so they, some of the kids didn't have phones and things like that, but we took lots of pictures that day. And we sang praise and worship. We had preaching that day. Let's see, 2 young girls. This was precious. After Diane Fleetwood led in worship, 2 of the girls came and they stood in front of us and they sang their songs that they wrote. And it was worship. And it was the most precious thing in the world. And then we had to leave. And that was hard. It was very, very hard to leave that day, that school. And but we went to another one, and there was a lot of little kids at this next one. And we did the same kind of thing, sang songs, handed out Bibles, things like that. But one of the hard things was actually the school that we went to, the second school. A lot of the kids that were in that school are sponsored by Compassion International. And one of the hardest things to see, because I'll be the first to tell you, and I told my kids this the other night, when they start talking about that stuff places, I just tune them out. Because I don't know if my money's really going to that. I don't know if it's actually, but whenever I heard that these kids, Christy told us they were all sponsored by Compassion International, you look over and you see these other kids that can't be in school. Because they, 1, don't have the money, 2, their parents don't want them in school, 3, they're not old enough. And that was hard because it was like immediately I thought, how many times have those kids been passed up, And it really put a lot of things in perspective for me. And that was hard. That was very difficult. And even at the first school, there were kids that were just off to the side. But we gave them stuff and we let them have things as well. And then on Sunday, we traveled to Yedji, and this is where we would spend the next few days. And Christy will tell you this is where our heart is in Yedji. And when we first got there, we went to the place we were staying, unpacked our luggage, got on the bus, and we went to Lake Volta, which is where the boats are. And in a few of the pictures, if you could see it, there were these big long boats, and that's where kids that are in slavery will work, bring boats in and out. And we went there, but there was a ton of people because the next day was market day, and it was packed. So we didn't get out of the bus because there was just a slew of people. But it was just hard to see those boats and know that there were going to be kids that were going to be 3 and 4 years old. That's how young they start selling their kids. 3 and 4 years old. And their jobs is we pass this place and there's these plastic containers that the 3 and 4 year olds are responsible to fill up on the boat. And they're responsible for getting the water because there's holes in the boat, and so their responsibility at 3 and 4 years old is to fill those containers and dump them out. And that was hard when we heard about that. But we traveled to the village in Yedji, and when they saw the bus, they knew. And they started running. I mean, you just would look, and you look to the sides, and these kids were just running from their houses, coming out of the woodwork. I mean, there was a ton of them. And these kids were precious. 2 little girls, they just grabbed my hands and had one on each side. And the cool thing about the first night of the village was that we got to meet Gideon. And Gideon is the first kid they ever rescued off the lake. That was really neat. And learning more about that story was really hard because when they first saw Gideon or met Gideon, his older brother was on the lake fishing, and he said, well, it's Gideon's turn to fast. And they said, well, what do you mean by that? And they said, well, it's his turn not to eat. And these kids have to take turns not eating because their family just doesn't have the money to support them. And that's why they settle into slavery. But they rescued Gideon, and from what I hear, and I saw pictures of when they first rescued him and now, and he's in school, and he looks healthy, and he's just a great kid with a great personality. But we went to bed, we went back to the place, went to bed, ate dinner, things like that. And then on Monday, we started off by going to the prison. Now, that sounds kind of crazy, but it's not like our prison. We went in, and they were all these, it was an all-male prison. And they just sat there, and they started off by singing their worship for us. That was pretty awesome. To watch a bunch of men are in prison singing songs of the Lord. And immediately I thought of Paul and Silas and their chains and how their praises is what ultimately broke those chains off of them. And Diane led worship for us. Courtney signed a song, and Taylor and I were able to do some dramas. Kathy and Megan shared the word. I mean, the power of God was all over that place. We were able to pray. Kathy had a time of, she preached deliverance, and we were able to pray for some men that wanted, they came up. I mean, whenever she said, would anybody want prayer? And all the men that were sitting down, hands went up. That was awesome. It was immediate. And they came to us for prayer. I got to pray with a few guys, and they were just so grateful. They told us, they just kept telling us, thank you, thank you, thank you. And we gave Bibles, we gave salvation bracelets, and this was really cool. We went to, I won't share a ton about this, but we went to the farm where the prison owns this farm, and it's over 200 acres of land. But they can't farm all of it because their equipment is broken down. And they just don't have the power to do it. And so we went out there to see it, and trust me, it does not look like our farmland. But when we got there, of course, Craig was in his element because he was, Mr. Farmer. But some of us went out on the farmland, and he started talking to these men, and the Lord gave Craig a direction, because they said, well, how much would it cost? Because their money's different, and they said, well, we can get two or three of the things that we need together for $18,000 US, which really is pretty good for US dollars for what they need. And so Craig, the Lord just downloaded this thing into Craig and this idea, and so he was able to tell them about what he's going to come home and do, and how to raise money for them to be able to get a tractor and supplies that they need, because 200 acres of land with produce would help them tremendously. And so that was really awesome to be able for that to happen while we were there. And what a coincidence, right, that Craig Williams was on our trip. It's all God. We went back, we got to go to the school. We had to take some pictures of the sponsored kids that day. It was just a full day of just going back and forth places, but it was awesome. I'm going to try to speed this a little bit. Tuesday, we were going to get some equipment to be able to work on the soccer field. That's donated by, or that's in honor of Derek Arbin, Lori and Matt Kerner's son. And we were going to try to go see if we could get equipment to help kind of fix that up. But then we went to the vocational school. And their vocational school is the first school that Micah 6-8 has. And it's a bunch of women, and they're learning how to sew and different things like that. And the awesome thing is that these women were sewing with kids strapped to their backs because they don't have anywhere to take their kids. And that was really hard. That was just like an eye-opening thing for me, because I'm like, these women they want to be here. They want to come here every day and learn and do these things, or they wouldn't strap their kids to their backs while they're trying to do all this stuff. And it really spoke to me. But Christy had to take some pictures of the students, and so we stood around, we held babies and talked to kids while they were, and there was, school was supposed to be in session, but half of the kids were over where we were, because, white people is just a big deal over there. And so we had to try to get them to go back to school. That was a challenge. But before we sang worship with Diane, the women sang their songs of worship for us. And I'm telling you right now, we ain't got nothing on them. I mean, they worshiped. And they didn't have instruments, didn't have music, they had their voices. And listening to them clap and dance and sing the Lord, despite all that they don't have, was moving. It was just moving. And they worshiped with every ounce of their being. They worshiped. And Diane led some songs after that, and then I had the awesome opportunity to be able to preach that day at the school. And for anybody that was there, that's sitting out there, it was a little chaotic. It was hard. It just seemed like nothing was going right, and they were trying to give an interpreter to me, and we tried going back and forth with it, and finally I just thought, I'm just going to speak, and God will do it for me, because I'm tired of dealing with it. And so I got done speaking, and like at the end of it, they started shouting amen and hallelujah, and so it was like, God, you did it. You know, I didn't need to fight these interpreters, and which was my prayer, was that God would interpret it for me, and I believe that He did, and He delivered a message, then we went out and did church clap with them. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's just a dance that we decided to take to Africa with us. And they loved it. A lot of women jumped in, tried to learn it real quick, and that was a lot of fun. And then we went to an Islamic school. Now, the only reason we were able to get into this school was because they dug a well. Jacob's well. They gave them fresh water. And over there, that's a big deal. There have been people before that have tried to get into this school and they wouldn't let them. But because, Christy said, because we gave them water, they're open. And so we got to go into an Islamic school with 1,000 kids. And we got to preach. And we got to sing. And we got to watch God. Now, it was overwhelming. I mean, those kids, we felt like rock stars. I mean, we were up on this stage, it was a little higher than this, and we were up just in front of their classrooms, and these kids were, literally pushing each other to get just to us, just so they could be right there. And it was overwhelming. There was a lot of kids, they were pushing, they were trying to touch us, and it was overwhelming, but it was awesome. I mean, it was awesome to be able to say that we went and we preached and spread the word of God in an Islamic school. And it was just awesome. And it just shows you that, offering fresh water in a country that doesn't have it, what doors that can open. We went back to the guest house and we rested and went to the village. We saw the kids again. We passed out some stuff, and it was a little hard to watch because a lot of the moms that ended up coming on the scene were just really not very nice about things. A lot of them would just kind of try to get kids out of the way to be able to get the stuff, and sometimes those people will take the stuff and go sell it for money so that they can feed their families or different things like that. So we kind of had to stop that, but that was hard to watch. So then Wednesday we were going to work at the new primary and vocational school that Micah 6A, and they're almost completely finished, which is awesome. It was so cool to see those schools in person. And we were going to try to do soccer field, but it didn't end up working out. But we were able to pick up trash and just do some different work around the school and stuff. And we started trying to dig up and pull weeds off the soccer field. We got some of it cleared, but we. After that, we decided to go back to the school where we had been just to give some time for hopefully the equipment to show up, but it never did. And then we were able to go back to the primary school after going to the other school, and we came back and we laid hands and anointed the school and prayed for the property of the schools, and that was a big deal. That was one of Christy's big things, was just praying over those schools and the kids that were going to be going into them. And then Thursday, we got up really early, and we headed back to Kumasi. Leaving Yeji was very hard. But I have down here, I was ready to be home. I was ready to see my family. And it was a pretty smooth ride. We played music, sang, worship, danced, had a good time on the bus, and it helped make time pass a little bit more. But we stopped at a deaf school because we still had several supplies left. And we stopped at this deaf school, and Courtney, we're like, oh, Courtney can sign one of her songs. And it was so cool because she stood up on this, it was like a concrete thing, and she stood up there, and the kids started doing it with her. And that was so cool. I mean, it was powerful. And, we weren't expecting that, but they didn't understand, it was like they didn't understand, but at the same time, they were signing the song Redeemed. And that was really awesome. And they absolutely loved it. We left the rest of the soccer balls, candy, and other supplies that we had with us, and it was a very, very cool experience. Let's see here. Then Friday, we got up really super early again, and when I say super early, 5:15 there, so 1:15 here a.m. And we were headed back to Accra. Awesome bus trip. Went to the art shopping center. We went to the drum shop first. That was really awesome because whenever you're a newbie on the trip, you get to go in and they play for you, and then you get to play. And that was really awesome. He taught us how to do different beats and stuff, and that was super cool. And then we just went shopping the next couple hours, and we went to this place called Franklin's. And I ate rice for 5 days, and I was so ready for normal food. And there was other stuff, but I'm just not, I don't like to branch out very much. And so we went to this place, and they had American food, and oh my gosh, French fries never tasted so good. I said, we just need some grease in our life. That is all we needed was some grease and fried food. And so we were able to get that, and we were ordering French fries, mozzarella sticks, onion rings, garlic bread, pizza. It was interesting combinations. But no, it was fine. That was a highlight of that day. But we got to the airport and did all that fun stuff, and we had to go through 3 things with security, and that was just a little stressful. It was when we finally got to where our gate was, we had to go through another one, and they did the whole pat down thing, and it was a little uncomfortable. So they do this thing where they take this, it's like a sample, they get a sample off of you, and one of our people, it showed up on the computer that she had explosives. And so she said she looked at the computer screen and she was just like, oh my gosh. And so they redid it, and it all ended up being fine, but she's like, yeah, she was a little freaked out by that. And she's somebody that, it was just fun for it to be her. So then we got on the plane, and we landed safely in New York a little after 5 a.m., and it was an awesome feeling to be back in the United States, but I felt like part of my heart was still in Africa. And went through customs. I was super easy. They said it was going to be this long process, and it was really fast, really good. And then our flight was scheduled to leave at 9:46, and by this point, we're just ready to be at home. We're just ready to be home. And so we had a few hours of layover, but we didn't end up leaving until 10:30 because the flight coming in, was delayed from where it was coming from. And then when we got to our flight from New York to Indy was a little rocky. Started out more rough. But I leaned over to the person sitting beside me and I said, God got us this far, He'll get us home. But getting back into Indiana was awesome. When I first got back into town, I just saw to see Meemaw because I knew she would want to see me. And she was very excited to see me. And God is just so good, and I was so thankful for what God did. But what I want to do is I'm done telling you about the things we did, and I just want to read some of the stuff that I've written down about my perspective, and then I'm going to just share a short message with you. But what God showed me before I left was the word simplify. That's all I kept hearing was simplify. And I didn't know what God was trying to tell me. But after being in Africa, I know. One thing I brought home is this: I don't need excess. I saw villages that had nothing. A lot of kids that we saw in Yeji had no clothes. And were just, some of them just had underwear on. They didn't have clothes. Every day when we went, that's all they had on. I realize that I live in a country of opportunity, and I am blessed to have 2 jobs, but it put it into perspective for me. Do I really need a closet full of clothes when I don't wear half of them? Which my closet really isn't all that full, but it's pretty full. Do I need a brand new car? Do I need the best and newest cell phone? None of these things are bad, but for me, I'm going to change from a life of excess to a life of simplicity. I need to be more grateful for what I have instead of ungrateful for what I don't have. I need to spend more time counting my blessings than keeping track of what I can't have. If I can save money, which I'm going to be able to, I want to sponsor kids that go to school. They need school. They need to see that they have a chance. They can break their family cycle. They can have generational curses broken off of them. And if my life of excess to simplicity can change the course of one kid's life, then it's worth it. These kids need a voice. They need someone to believe in them. If it means saying no to material things and yes to a kid changing their life, then it is worth it. After all, God can take my small no's and turn them into big yeses. It may be hard to say no, but don't think about what I'm saying no to. Think about what I'm going to say yes to. I'm saying yes to the 3 to 4 year old kids who could be put into childhood slavery. I'm saying yes to the kid that has generations of family that live in poverty. I'm saying yes to the kid that has dreams to make something of himself. I'm saying yes to all of those kids that don't have a voice or someone to fight for them. I'm saying yes to the kids that have to take turns fasting because their parents can't afford to feed them. Don't look at the no. Focus on the yes. My life has been forever impacted by this trip. And I'm beyond thankful that God gave me this opportunity. My life of simplicity will also teach me that Jesus is all I need. And the people in Africa realize their desperate need for Jesus. He is their only source of hope, joy, love, and peace. He is the object of their worship. And it inspired me to be more desperate for Jesus and realize that without him, I'm nothing. The Micah 6:8 Project is a bright light in those dark villages, and those people light up when the project comes. It is literally like Jesus walking into their village. They run from all over just to see the white people. The kids running is something that will forever be etched in my mind. I close my eyes and I see it. And it got me thinking about my relationship or our relationship with Jesus. Do we get excited to go to church or to be in his presence? Do we run to him like he is all we have? That is our number one problem. We have too many other things to rely on. We have too many resources at our fingertips. And we need to get back to the simpleness of Jesus, where all we need is him and all we want is him. And my mission field is not to be in Africa, but right here. And it is telling and showing people that we just need Jesus. The simple Jesus that we first fell in love with. The true intimate relationship with Him. And I feel bad for the church because we are missing out on so much. Your whole life would change if you put Jesus at the center of everything. Your whole life will change if you allow yourself to be intimate with your Savior. Make your life all about Jesus. And when this happens, everything else will fall into place. I want to share one more thing. Friday when I woke up, I was getting ready for a blaze, and the phrase that came to my mind was living my best life. It was the start of a blaze 2019, and a week ago I was in Africa, possibly for the only time in my life. But as I think about this phrase, it makes me realize that I am living my best life. I am loved by God, and I am doing my absolute best to walk out the calling that is on my life. I am watching God move and work in people's lives and my own life. I am blessed beyond measure, and I am a child of God, and I have realized over the course of my life that the number one thing that matters is my relationship with God. Material things don't matter. Nothing and no one can even begin to compare to how God makes me feel. I feel satisfied, whole, and complete. And this world can keep its fancy cars, its high salaries, big houses, fancy clothes, and its empty promises. Because all I want is Jesus. Just give me Jesus. I don't say all of this to make myself look better or for people to even look at me, but this is truly the cry of my heart. Like I said, this trip had a lot of things in perspective for me. A lot of things that, I wanted to come back, and when I first got back, I told my kids the other night, I said I was just angry. I was angry at the fact that, I said this at one of we took time each night, and we went around the room, and we named our roses and thorns, and one of my things for one of the nights was, when we come into a place of worship on Sunday mornings, people can't even stand up for 30 minutes to sing songs. And I realize that some have health needs that they can't. But my point is that, people complain because they don't like the songs, or it's too loud, or it's not the right style of music, or it's this, or it's that. And it's like, you guys are missing the point. It's not about you. It's not about me. It's not about you. It's about God. And there's a saying by Francis Chan, and it said, someone says, I really didn't like the worship set this morning, and his response is, well, that's okay, because it's not about you anyway. It's not about you. It's about Jesus. And we need to get back to the fact that He is the reason we live, and He's the reason we wake up every morning, and He's the reason that we go throughout our life, and He is the only thing that we need. And as I was in Africa, I asked Delaney last night, I said, I want you to sing He Reigns, because it talks about the African plain. And every time I sang that song, I thought, man, how cool would it be to go to Africa? And now I got to go, and so I can sing that song and be like, yeah, I was on the African plain. It was really cool. And so I told her, I said, I want to sing that song. But, I said to her, I thought, she said, is there any other song? And I said, no, I came in this morning with one, but she was nice enough to change it for the basics. But the very first song we sang this morning, and I didn't know, like I said, I asked her for one. But this morning, as I was in Africa, the Lord gave me a message, and I was wondering if it was for the school, and then it wasn't. It wasn't. It was, I preached about Paul and Silas and the praises and their chains. That's what I preached on. And so I didn't know why God gave me this message, but He said it's for home. But the very first song we sang this morning, Your Great Name. The thing the Lord, the phrase that spoke out to me the most was, hungry souls receive grace. And when I went to Africa, one of the big things was hunger. These kids were hungry. And that's obviously for physical food, but this morning I want to look at a passage in Mark chapter 6. And as Jesus feeds the 5,000, and this is the scripture that the Lord gave me when I was in Africa. It says, the apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all they had done and taught. And then, because so many people were coming and going, they did not even have a chance to eat. And he said to them, come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest. So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. But many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. And when Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And so he began teaching them these things. And by this time it was late in the day, and so his disciples came to him. This is a remote place, they said, and it's already very late. Send the people away so they can go to the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat. And this is Jesus' response. He answered, you give them something to eat. They said to him, that would take 8 months' wages, 8 months of a man's wages. Are we to go and spend that much on bread and give them to eat? How many loaves do you have? He asked. Go and see. When they went out, they said 5 and 2 fish. Jesus directed them to have all the people sit down in groups on the green grass. And so they sat down in groups of hundreds and fifties. And taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. And then he gave them to his disciples and set before the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them all, and they all ate and were satisfied. And the people picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces of bread and fish. And the number of men who had eaten was 5,000. The people in this story recognized Jesus. It says in verse 33, they recognized him and they ran. They ran to get ahead of him. They didn't walk. They didn't take their sweet time. They saw Jesus. They recognized him. And they ran to the other side of the lake. These people were desperate to see and know Jesus. They knew that he could do awesome stuff for them. They knew that, and that is why they were so desperate to get to the lake, so that to the other side, so that they could see him and be in his presence. And Jesus knew, and he had compassion on them. And he said they need taught. They're like sheep without a shepherd. They have no direction. They need someone to talk to them. They need someone to teach them. And the disciples, they're thinking about physical food. I'm not going to say I didn't think about that after, because I definitely did. It was food. But they were thinking about the physical. And he said they wanted to send them away because it was late. But Jesus said, you give them something. You have what they need. You have what they need. And you see, this was an opportunity for Jesus to do a miracle. You see, we need to use, and I'm talking to you, we need to use what we have. Use your gifts, your talents, your abilities, and your skills. And you may think that it amounts to 5 loaves and 2 fish, but God says you have what it takes. Amen. You might not think it amounts to much. And I'm telling you right now, all we had to do was walk into the scene in those villages, and they had what they needed. We didn't have to have candy. We didn't have to have toys. All we had to do was walk in there, because they knew we had something that they didn't. And it wasn't material things. It was Jesus. It was light. It was a presence that they don't ever get. And so all we had was to walk on. And so sometimes we don't think we have what it takes, but God says, give me what you have, and I'll make it into something. I'll make it into something bigger. You give me your 2 loaves. You give me your 2 fish and your 5 loaves of bread, and you see what I can do with that. what you have. Offer it to God, and He'll multiply it. And He will use it beyond what you could ever imagine. He fed 5,000 people with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. And we reached over 1,000 kids by driving a bus into their village. Yeah, we gave them candy, but most of them just got 1 piece. And that's the only piece that they'll have until they go back. But I can guarantee you that a lot of those kids are still thinking about what we did for them. Oftentimes, we run to other people for what we need. But Jesus is saying, come to me, because I will give you more than what you need. We just need Jesus. We just need His presence. And He will use you with what little you have, and show you that it does not take, that it does a lot more and goes a lot farther than what you think, especially when God is doing the multiplying. Give God what you have, and then watch Him use you for kingdom work. You have no idea what you have until you let God take control of it. You offer what you have, and you might not think it's much, but you give it to God and you watch Him do what only He can do. You see, in the hands of this little boy, it wasn't going to do much. He had to give it to Jesus, and Jesus is the one that had to pray over it. And as they started handing it out, there was just more, and not one person left there hungry. Not one person left there without their bellies full. But you see, all we had in Africa was to show them grace. We didn't have a lot of food to feed them, but what did I say before I started? Hungry souls receive grace. And there are people that are hungry, and they think maybe they don't know what they're hungry for, but I'm telling you, there's a world out there. You don't have to go to Africa to know that there are lost people. They are looking for a change, and that's why I told my kids with the Blaze, I said, you invite kids to a Blaze because they need something different. You say it's a life-changing event, they'll come because they don't like their life. They need a change. They need something different. And so you might think, I don't have what it takes. Yes, you do, because if you have Jesus inside of you, you walk in confidence and knowing that God will use you for whatever He has. People are hungry. And we didn't give those people a lot of food. We gave them Jesus. We went into their villages, and all we did was walk onto the scene, and our life it showed. And like I said, I don't know that I'll ever get to go back. I don't know. I can't say right now. I don't know. But I know for a fact that God said, there are people that I call to go over there. There are people that I call to go and live in other countries. But your mission field is here. Because the church is so off-base. Christians don't even realize what they have. They don't realize the resources. They don't realize the things that they have at their fingertips. But they don't press in. They don't press in. And He said, Emily, I have placed you in this calling. I have placed you where you are in your life, so that you can show people that they just need to be desperate for Jesus. That all they need is Him. Just offer what you have. God is waiting to use you. God is waiting for you to say, here I am, Jesus. Take what little I think I have and amaze me. Multiply it. I think about the 12 disciples, and they probably looked at Jesus and thought, you're absolutely crazy. How are 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish going to feed 5,000 people? But you see, when you put it into the right hands, when you put it into the right hands, and it doesn't need to be my hands, it doesn't need to be your hands, it needs to be God's hands. And when you place and you give up control and you surrender those things and you put it in the hands of Jesus, He'll do with it what He will. But they had 12 basketfuls, and I love that because it was one for each disciple. See what I can do? It was evident. Pick up what's left. And each disciple went away with a basket. And when they looked at that, I can guarantee they thought, wow. And when God moves and works in your life, and He does what only He can do, you step back and you say, wow. How did you take that and make it into this? How did you use that for this? How?